Prologue, the Great Unraveling and the New Tapestry. The 21st century was a tapestry frayed by conflict, its threads stained with the ideologies of old. The Korean peninsula, once a bastion of division, had endured decades of a tyrannical North Korean regime, a shadow that clung to the land long after its iron grip began to weaken. But even darkness eventually yielded to dawn. A series of internal uprisings, fueled by a populace yearning for true freedom, combined with carefully orchestrated diplomatic pressure from the south, led to the regime's collapse. From these ashes, a unified Korea emerged, not merely as a nation, but as the philosophical cornerstone for a new vision of global harmony. This nascent Korean state, guided by principles of justice and cultural preservation, began to expand its influence through alliances and benevolent integration, ultimately blooming into the Heping Dynasty. This name, meaning peace in Chinese, symbolized its core philosophy and its legacy of enlightened rule. Simultaneously, the Western world underwent its own dramatic transformation. The continent of Europe, scarred by ecological crises and economic collapses, found common cause with the resilient nations of the Anglosphere. Through decades of intricate negotiations and technological convergence, they merged, forming the formidable Unified Occidental Hegemony. Within this colossal entity, the ancient land of Israel, bolstered by technological leaps and strategic alliances, grew into a regional powerhouse, extending its reach across much of the Middle East. A pivotal development was the heavy allegiance of Saudi Arabia, which became a crucial client state to Israel within the hegemony, ruthlessly cracking down on any lingering anti-Israeli sentiment, ensuring a unified front. The world of 2342 was thus defined by two colossal entities: the culturally rich, diverse Heping Dynasty in the east, and the technologically advanced, militarily potent Unified Occidental Hegemony in the west. Their paths, though distinct, were bound to intersect, often in the precarious dance of diplomacy and rivalry. Chapter 1, Echoes of the Past. Kale, barely 14 cycles old, stood on the observation deck of New Pyeongchang's Skyspire. The city lights a dizzying constellation beneath him. Around him, the gentle hum of floating aerocars and the distant murmur of quantum generators filled the air. This Pyongyang was a far cry from the desolate, fearful city of his grandmother's whispered tales. The old North Korea, a chilling specter he only knew through grainy archival holos and the hushed, horrified stories told by his elders, felt like a nightmare from a distant galaxy. They controlled your thoughts, Kale, his grandmother Hyon would recount, her voice still laced with a tremor. Every word, every song, every dream. The great leader was God, and deviation was erasure. Kale shuddered, despite the warmth of the integrated climate control. He'd seen the simulations of the old re-education camps, the emaciated figures, the omnipresent surveillance. Here, in the Sultanate, the Grand Council of Ideas championed free expression, and the concept of an unmonitored private thought was a fundamental right. Yet, the horrors weren't entirely gone. The news feeds, though censored for graphic content, occasionally flickered with reports of injustices from the hegemony, whispers of labor camps, or systemic disenfranchisement in their vast, interconnected territories. Kale, bright and intensely empathetic, felt a growing ache in his chest with each new report, a quiet fury that resonated with the ancestral trauma of his own people. He excelled in his studies at the Sultanate's Academy of Diplomacy and Intercultural Exchange, his mind alight with the ideals of justice and global unity instilled by the benevolent Heping Dynasty. Chapter 2, The Humanitarian Mission. The news had been circulating for weeks, hushed but undeniable. Reports of widespread, systemic indentured servitude within the hegemony, particularly within the vast industrial complexes controlled by expanded Israel. Displaced populations, often refugees from resource wars or climate disasters, were reportedly lured by false promises, then trapped in a cycle of insurmountable debt, forced to labor in the hegemony's burgeoning infrastructure projects and advanced manufacturing plants. They were, in all but name, slaves. The Heping Dynasty, founded on the principle of human dignity, could not remain silent. A high-level humanitarian and economic oversight delegation was swiftly formed, tasked with formally investigating the reports and, if confirmed, negotiating the immediate repatriation and rehabilitation of these enslaved populations. Kale, despite his youth, had shown exceptional aptitude in linguistic analysis and cross-cultural negotiation during his academy debates. To his astonishment, he was selected as one of the youngest attachés to join the delegation, a testament to the Heping Dynasty's belief in nurturing young talent. He packed his modest bag in his new Pyongyang apartment, his heart a mixture of trepidation and fierce determination. This is a chance to right a wrong, Kale, his mentor, Ambassador Jin, had told him. To show the world the Sultanate's true strength is in its compassion. The journey was long, first via atmospheric freighter to a neutral transit hub in Central Asia, then transferring to a high-speed intercontinental jet provided by the Viet Lao Thai Confederation, a symbol of their shared values. Chapter 5. The Century of Iron and Fire. The ambush in Tel Aviv ignited the spark. The Heping Dynasty's outrage was immediate and profound. The hegemony's denial was swift and absolute. Diplomatic ties severed, the unspoken rivalry festered into open conflict. The first major blow came not from the Sultanate, but from the hegemony. Seeking to cripple the Heping Dynasty's western flank and secure vital transit routes, the combined forces of Europe and Israel launched a massive, coordinated invasion into Afghanistan. They encountered fierce resistance from the Heping Dynasty's local autonomous forces and the formidable Sultanate defense fleet. What began as a calculated military maneuver quickly devolved into a protracted, brutal engagement. The hegemony, with its superior cyber warfare and advanced robotics, initially made gains, pushing deep into the rugged mountains and valleys of Afghanistan. The prospect of losing such a critical Central Asian territory, which threatened to sever the Heping Dynasty's vital supply lines, sparked deep concern across New Hanyang. Years bled into decades, and Kale, hardened by his early experiences and demonstrating an uncanny strategic foresight, rose swiftly through the ranks of the Heping Dynasty's military. By the age of 25, he was appointed a general, known for his unconventional tactics and a profound empathy that allowed him to understand not just battlefields, but the hearts of people. Many within the hegemony believed Afghanistan would be a quick, decisive victory, underestimating the resilience of its people and the innovative spirit of the Heping Dynasty. However, a segment of the local Afghan population, including former Taliban members, had initially resisted the Heping Dynasty's integration, fearing that their lands would be relegated to a neglected backwater within the vast empire. They had seen past empires come and go, each promising much but delivering little beyond exploitation. But the reality of the Heping Dynasty's rule had been vastly different. It brought unprecedented development. Advanced hydroponic farms transformed arid lands, clean energy grids powered new schools and medical facilities, and robust trade routes brought prosperity. Living standards had soared, and cultural exchange flourished. The Afghans discovered a surprising number of similarities with the broader Heping Dynasty, particularly in their culinary traditions. The aromatic Kabuli pulio had become a beloved staple in New Hanyang, the dynasty's bustling Korean heart. Chapter 4. The betrayal. The second day dawned with an ominous stillness. Ambassador Jin had secured a limited tour of a rehabilitation and employment center, a term that rang hollow in Kale's ears. As their ground car, a heavily armored, Sultanate-issued vehicle, navigated through the sprawling industrial district, a sudden, piercing whine filled the air. Crack, the driver's side window imploded, sending a spray of safety glass inward. The vehicle swerved violently. Kale was thrown against his seat restraints, his ears ringing. Outside, flashes of energy weapons lit up the sterile grey environment. "Ambush!" shouted a security officer, his voice tight with alarm through the shattered window. Kale saw them. Figures in the distinctive, angular armor of the IDF, Israel Defense Force, emerging from behind prefabricated warehouses. Their weapons were already tracking. Another energy blast seared across the vehicle's plating, sending sparks flying. The driver fought to regain control, but a second, more powerful hit crippled the vehicle's propulsion. "This is an unprovoked attack on a diplomatic mission," Ambassador Jin's voice boomed, amplified by the vehicle's internal comms. "Ceasefire immediately." But the IDF soldiers advanced, their faces obscured by visors, their movements precise and ruthless. Kale, pressing himself against the back of the seat, felt a cold dread clamp around his heart. The horror stories of old North Korea had been about unseen threats, silent disappearances. This was brutal, immediate, and terrifyingly real. The Heping Dynasty's mission of peace had been met with violence. The echoes of his grandmother's fear were no longer just stories, they were a chilling, present reality. The dream of freeing the enslaved had collided head-on with the unyielding might of the hegemony, and Kale, a young boy from a unified Pyongyang, was caught in the terrifying crossfire. Chapter 3, The Lion's Den. Tel Aviv, the hegemony's jewel of the Middle East, gleamed under a perpetual, artificial twilight, its towering, self-sustaining arcologies piercing the sky like crystalline spears. The air was thick with the hum of advanced technology and the faint, metallic tang of industrial output. It was an aesthetic of cold efficiency, a stark contrast to the Heping Dynasty's organic, harmonious cities. Here, the absolute loyalty of Saudi Arabia was evident, its vast oil and energy resources seamlessly integrated into Israel's burgeoning industrial might, and any dissent swiftly and brutally quelled by joint hegemony Saudi security forces. The delegation, escorted by minimal security, was housed in a designated diplomatic quarter, its energy field shimmering almost imperceptibly around their compound. Kale observed everything, the sleek, autonomous patrol drones that glided silently overhead, the faces of the occasional hegemony citizens they passed, a mix of indifference and veiled curiosity. He noticed, too, the almost invisible class distinctions, the sleek, chrome-clad elite, and the downtrodden, grey-robed laborers who moved with a weary resignation, their eyes often downcast, their movements stiff. These were the ones they had come for. Ambassador Jin had initiated diplomatic channels immediately, requesting access to the industrial zones and the labor records. The initial response from the hegemony officials was polite but evasive, citing proprietary information and security protocols. The tension in the air was palpable, thicker than the manufactured fog that occasionally rolled through the city's lower levels. Kale, observing the hegemony's tightly controlled environment, felt a prickle of unease. This was no open dialogue, it felt more like an elaborate stage play. Chapter 6, Kale's Gambit and the Turning Tide. It was in this desperate period that Kale earned his legend. Rather than fighting these pockets of resistance, he sought them out. He understood that their initial opposition stemmed from a deep-seated distrust of foreign powers, a memory deeply etched in their history. He met with tribal elders and former commanders, speaking not of conquest, but of shared values and mutual respect. He showed them the data, the tangible improvements the Heping dynasty had brought, the open-door policies that empowered local governance, and the Sultan's unwavering commitment to self-determination. He spoke of the common thread of honor and resilience that bound them to the unified Korean-led empire. His words, delivered with a quiet sincerity and backed by the undeniable benefits brought by the Heping dynasty, resonated deeply. Kale successfully recruited thousands of these former resistors, turning them into fierce, invaluable allies who knew every hidden pass and every strategic vantage point within their homeland. This alliance, a testament to Kale's strategic brilliance and the dynasty's inclusive vision, became the crucial turning point. The combined forces, with local expertise guiding Heping dynasty's advanced military, meticulously pushed back the hegemony, inflicting heavy losses and decisively turning the tide of the war. The conflict stretched across a full century, becoming known as the Century of Iron and Fire. The hegemony's initial surge faltered, then was painstakingly pushed back. Their supply lines, stretching across vast distances, became increasingly vulnerable, and their highly centralized command structure proved less adaptable than the Heping dynasty's decentralized, culturally attuned forces. As the war progressed, the European components of the hegemony, weary of endless conflict and astronomical resource expenditure, began to chafe under Israel's increasingly dominant military leadership. Chapter 7, The Heping dynasty's Ascendance and the Pax Asiatica. By the dawn of the 25th century, the landscape of global power had irrevocably shifted. The hegemony's grand ambition in Afghanistan had crumbled, and its forces were not just repelled but pursued. The Heping dynasty, having proven its military prowess and the resilience of its unified spirit, steadily advanced westward. Region by region, the Heping dynasty leveraged its alliances and cultural diplomacy, liberating the enslaved populations and integrating the diverse peoples of the Middle East into its burgeoning domain. The former client state of Saudi Arabia, its regime destabilized by the prolonged war and internal dissent, crumbled, its territories willingly joining the Heping dynasty. Drawn by promises of justice and autonomy, Israel, its vast Middle Eastern empire shrinking under the relentless pressure, retreated to its core territories, a shadow of its former might. The century-long war had exhausted both superpowers, but the hegemony's internal divisions, exacerbated by the conflict's failures, ultimately led to its de facto dissolution. Europe, no longer willing to bear the burden of Israel's expansionist policies, quietly negotiated a separate peace. Finally, in the year 2442, a momentous treaty was signed in Al-Quds, the newly established Heping Dynasty capital, formerly Jerusalem, a testament to the Heping Dynasty's holistic victory, a peace agreement with Europe. The terms were clear: Europe would maintain its independent, non-aggressive union, and the Heping Dynasty would now stretch from the ancient heartlands of Korea all the way to the newly integrated territories of the Middle East, a truly Pan-Asian empire. In the aftermath, the Heping Dynasty embarked on a meticulous process of accountability. A grand tribunal was convened in the liberated city of Fa, formerly Tel Aviv, where Israeli officials and their direct collaborators, those who had actively orchestrated and profited from the widespread indentured servitude and the brutality of the hegemony's expansion, were brought to justice. After extensive, transparent trials, those found guilty of grievous human rights abuses and war crimes were met with the ultimate penalty, a somber but firm demonstration of the Heping Dynasty's commitment to its founding principles. However, the tribunal's justice was not indiscriminate. Thousands of individuals who had been forced into complicity or minor administrative roles within the hegemony's system, often under duress or threat, were carefully identified, offered clemency, and provided with rehabilitation and integration into the Heping Dynasty's compassionate society. Kale, now a venerable statesman and hero of the century of iron and fire, stood by the Sultan's side, a silent witness to the dawn of the Pax Asiatica, a peace forged in fire and secured by enduring principles, a testament to the spirit of a young boy from Pyongyang who remembered the horrors of the past and dared to dream of a unified, just future.